What are your cinematic influences? Do you have any? Like these kind of films you watch, what kind of films do you like? And are there any very heavy cinematic influences on in the films you make?
I'm not a film buff, and even
Okay.
before I came to Bombay, I had almost never been to a film festival. I didn't grow up watching films. I grew up reading, and I was immersed in music.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of if there are any influences, they would be the written word.
Uh-huh.
And only once I came to Bombay and I started this cinema journey,
Hmm.
I sort of started trying to educate myself about cinema beyond what was being made in the mainstream in India. Because the Indian mainstream, especially if you're in Bombay,
Hmm.
it just sort of envelops you and
Yeah.
you start believing that's all there is to it.
Yeah.
So I had to break that to go
Hmm.
beyond it to see that the kind of work that is being done in the medium,
Hmm.
what boundaries can I push
Mm-hmm.
with the audio and the video in this medium. So I don't know if those are influences, but I was moved by specific films, not even filmmakers. Like an entire filmography has never really spoken to me, so I wouldn't be able to pinpoint
Yeah.
favorite filmmakers.
Mm-hmm.
But there are a couple of films of Kislowski.
Hmm.
There are a couple of the earlier films of Inaritu, his
Mm-hmm.
trilogy,
Yeah.
Amores Perros,
Hmm.
Babel, and 21 Grams. Uh, uh, there is a lot of work in Korea
Hmm.
and Japan. Couple of films of Kurosawa,
Hmm.
like Ikiru was a guiding light for Bhonsle,
Okay.
and I made everybody watch it.
Mm-hmm.
So specific films really, but
Okay.
my
Yeah.
most of my inspiration in my life
Hmm.
came from reading.
Hmm.
Like Charles Dickens had a very profound influence on me growing
Hmm.
up, and he apparently in the 19th century was the only mainstream voice writing literature who
Yeah.
consistently turned the lens on the marginalized.
Hmm.
So that sort of made me maybe cultivate my voice of
Mm-hmm.
constantly trying to place
Hmm.
marginalized voices at the center of my narratives.
Okay. And your approach towards writing the script, you have said that it's very mathematical. That 15 to 20 minutes into the film, now I know that I have the audiences and now I can disturb them. Or then you can add a lullaby scene after the halal scene and then balance that. So what is your can you elaborate more on that mathematical approach towards writing a film?
No, so when I said all of that, I said it specifically in the case of Ajji. I
Okay.
do not do that with all my films. Like I
Yeah, yeah.
said, I change my process from film to film
Hmm.
depending on who it is that has given me that opportunity to make that film,
Hmm.
who it is, if I have a sense of who is it that I'm making the film for,
Hmm.
and what kind of resources I have at my disposal. My process changes. Like
Okay.
Ugly Bar, if you see Ugly Bar, it doesn't ascribe to any rules of screenwriting.
Yeah. Yeah.
There is no story in Ugly Bar.
Yeah.
It is simply three shots
Hmm.
and three murders. That's
Hmm.
all there is to it.
Yeah.
But with Ajji, I realized that
Hmm.
it was a company like Saregama
Hmm.
who had started a feature film arm called Yugli Films,
Yeah.
and they wanted something that, although they gave me the freedom to make the film I wanted in terms of mood and tone,
Hmm.
but I realized that they will also want a certain audience sitting in that seat and sitting through the film, because often with artistic films you can't draw in the wider audiences
Yeah.
because they need to have certain tropes.
Hmm.
They need to be thrilled or
Hmm.
entertained or allowed a certain escapism, or
Hmm.
just they need to be moved emotionally to
Yeah.
last the 90 minutes of the film.
Hmm.
So with Ajji specifically, I tried to keep the balance. I tried to keep the balance between the horror and the thrill
Hmm.
that I really wanted the audience to
Feel.
feel
Yeah.
discomforted by,
Hmm.
and the emotional bond between grandmother and granddaughter
Hmm.
that somewhere comforts the viewer, because
Yeah.
it's emotional. It's almost
Hmm.
sentimental.
Hmm. Hmm.
It almost makes you want to cry when the little girl says that. पर अज्जी तू बोली थी कि जिस दिन
Hmm.
खून निकला समझो
Hmm.
मैं बड़ी हो गई.
Hmm. Hmm.
So right after that or right before that will be the slitting of the murga.
Yeah.
So I had to buffer one with the other because I wanted this film to be watched by a slightly wider set of people
Okay.
and not just by a very niche festival audience.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay.
So from film to film, my prerogatives change.
Uh-huh.
Therefore, my approach changes, and
Uh-huh.
therefore it's also fun because you're going into unknown territory with every film. I
Hmm.
don't rely on the same formula that I tried the last time round.
Okay. And like I'm sure that financing a film like Ajji must have been really difficult. So how did that ended up on on the theater screens, and what was the process of financing a film like Ajji? Getting finance for a film like Ajji?
So, like I said, Saregama's
Yeah.
film wing called Yugli started with Ajji. Ajji was their first film.
Uh-huh.
I've also, I think it's also a journey by default. I don't plan it. But all my films have been made by first time producers.
Okay.
Elaichi was a first time producer.
Uh-huh.
Tandav was a first time producer. Ajji was a first time producer.
Hmm.
Bhonsle was a bunch of 4 first time producers.
Okay.
So the kind of, I mean, when you say how did I raise finance for Ajji, nobody would give me money to make a film like Ajji.
Yeah.
Now here was Udly trying to do something new because they were a new company. They had never made a film before Ajji,
Uh-huh.
and they were also entering unknown territory with me.
Hmm.
So when you have producers with you who are willing to go down an unknown path with you, then you get to do what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
But
Okay.
then in hindsight, you realize that fuck, we pulled off the impossible.
Yeah.
If it was a producer who had made 5 films before this, they would not have allowed me the kind of things that I did with Ajji.
Yeah.
Because they would have known that these things are not going to work in the box office. These things are going to scare
People.
audiences
Yeah.
away. They would have made me censor the script before I even started shooting the film.
Mm-hmm.
So it helped me on all these films that I had producers who were discovering along with me.
Okay. And how do you sustain your integrity as an artist while you're constantly trying to your fight is going on constantly to make a film you want to make?
Yeah, so I don't know how to answer that. I mean, you're fighting that at every day with
Hmm.
every conference or con call or phone call or conference room meeting with everything. You're fighting that all the time. So I
Yeah.
don't know what I even understand with the word integrity.
Hmm.
I might come up with an idea,
Okay.
and that idea might create images in my head, and I see the film a certain way when I
Hmm.
come up with that idea.
Hmm.
Then I put it down as a story,
Hmm.
and the first person I narrated to, say the main producer, he reacts to it and he says, you know what, this seem problematic. I don't agree with this, but I want to make the film. So
Okay.
you really want to see the film made. So you go back and you recalibrate those 2, 3 things and you present the story again. It gets greenlit. Then you come up with a script where you have people you collaborate with. They come in with their visions. It becomes a collective vision.
Yeah.
Then then actors come in. Then actors come in with their 2 bits, and they have their ways of seeing their characters. Maybe there's an actor you really want to work with, and that actor disagrees with the way you see the character, but
Okay.
you want to find a collaborative way forward. So you incorporate certain things the actor says. What I call this collaborative recalibration. You might call it compromise. So I don't understand what integrity means, because in a film, it's so collaborative that at one point you let go of the initial images that you saw and you start embracing new images every time new people start joining the film.
Oh.
I'll give
Okay.
you a very specific anecdote.
Huh.
Ajji, there was a cut of Ajji that, according to me, was a locked cut. I didn't want to change anything in it, but Guneet Monga, who was an EP on the film, she
Yeah.
brought in one of the hottest sales agents of France, a company called Charades, who loved Ajji. And Ajji was one of the 4 films they represented that year on the international distribution circuit.
Okay.
They loved it so much that they made it their spearheading film that year after the Cannes Film Festival.
Yeah.
But there was a certain chunk, about a 7 or 8 minute chunk, that they thought had no place in this film. They said, this needs to go. And I had a sleepless night. I said, there is the integrity of the film that I want out there. And then there is the possibilities that Charades opens up for this film. So I took a difficult decision and I took those 7 minutes out.
Okay.
And that is the film that you saw. So does that make me a filmmaker who compromises integrity? Or does that make me a filmmaker who saw the larger picture and ensured that you get to watch a film that otherwise you would never get to watch?
Yeah. Okay.
You
Yeah.
see what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't understand
Ha ha.
compromise and integrity after
Ha
a
ha.
point, because
Hmm.
getting a feature film made in this country is anyway so hard.
Hmm.
Getting a feature film like Ajji and Bhonsle are near miracles
Yeah.
that I open myself up to
Hmm.
taking inputs and recalibrations from the people who collaborate
Hmm.
with me.
Okay. And a lot of scenes I've seen, like your style of filmmaking, your craft of filmmaking, you use a lot, like you have said that you use the actors as a cohesive part of that shot, like they're part of the mise en scene. Can you
Yeah.
use, like, take one scene from Ajji, maybe if Bhosle is too much to reveal, can you take one scene from Ajji and can we break it down in all the terms of all the tools you have as a filmmaker, that this is how you intended to make this? This was your intent as an artist.
Actually, you throw me a scene.
The
I
scene.
probably do that in every scene. But yeah,
Okay.
throw a scene at me.
So the scene where the cop comes for the first time after the rape has happened to
Yeah.
the house, and the conversation happens between the Aji and the family and the cop.
Uh, okay, so you've actually picked the most difficult scene to break down in terms of meso scene, because I don't rely much on dialogue. And if you see
Yes.
Bhosle pretty much
Yes.
the whole film has no dialogue, especially not expositional dialogue.
Huh.
But in Ajji, this particular scene is a dialogue scene.
Huh. Huh.
It was 16 pages of dialogue.
Yeah.
So it's a very difficult scene to
Hmm.
approach and deconstruct, but let me try. So, what I actually believe, and I've said often, I think what you're referring to as well, is that, and some actors get offended when I say this,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I only mean it in the most respectful way. I see the actor, and I see a fine actor actually
Hmm.
as a fine tool, as a
Hmm.
very finely crafted tool that becomes one with the other elements in the frame, with the
Yeah.
light, with the choice of lens,
Yeah.
with the placement of production design,
Hmm.
with how the actor occupies that frame. So,
Hmm.
like for example, Manoj Bajpayee is one
Hmm.
of the finest tools I have worked with. He's almost like a tuning fork. Like
Hmm.
you hit him like this, you'll get a certain vibration of sound. You hit him gently, you'll get a certain vibration of sound. So when I go on a close up with him, I make him vibrate at a certain frequency. If I see him in a wide shot, I'll make him vibrate at a different frequency. And he allows that. He surrenders to the director.
Yeah.
So that is what I mean when I say that the actor is one of the tools in that mise en scene. I don't see an actor as a performer. That is something that you would do in theater. Theater is an actor's medium. Cinema is not an actor's medium.
Yeah.
And the lesser films, most of the films that Bollywood churns out, mainstream Bollywood, they rely a lot on performance and dialogue delivery.
Huh.
And over there, cinema really takes a backseat.
Yeah.
What mise en scene do you have in a lot of those films? But close up, close up, close up, close up, master shot. Close up, close up, close up, close up, master shot. It's how TV is also shot.
Yeah.
It's exactly how theater is done. The only thing you don't have in theater is the close up.
Yeah.
So those actors, and this was my training for myself before I arrived at my formula of mise en scene. Those actors, they do the same performance in a close up that they would in the master shot, and they end up looking like bad actors because they are overperforming for the close up. And they may not really be bad actors. It's just a bad filmmaker who's not used all his mise en scene tools well.
Yeah.
The actor being one. So in that particular 15-minute scene where the cop comes to the house, what I have done is I played with levels. I break eye level. Also, that space is a very cramped space. It's an 8 by 8 foot real house. It's not even a set. So in an 8 by 8 foot space, I don't have the liberty of camera movement.
Yeah.
At most, I can play with vertical movement or breaking of the vertical space, because the horizontal space only allows me to do so much. So what I played with was the power hierarchy between the cop and the other people, given where they were placed vis-a-vis him, and given where his eye line was vis-a-vis them. So when he talks to Ajji, for example, he pulls his stool closer, and the eye level becomes a top-down eye level. So he's talking down to her. When he's referring to the prostitute standing at the door, she is almost inconsequential and he's filling up the frame.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
When
Yeah.
I'm trying to sort of frame the mother Vibha and the prostitute Leela in the same frame to show that these are two women who are probably in the same level of the social, food chain, but they are trapped in very different social conditions.
Yeah.
I use the mirror where
Yeah.
they occupy the frame
Yeah.
almost split evenly,
Yeah.
but they are in different spaces.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I used a lot of that spatial mise-en-scene to sort of create the power dynamics of the scene because I was limited by geography. I had only 8 by 8 feet to play this in. So when I do that, I don't really have any props to play with. Again, because it's a limited space.
Yeah.
What do I prop that space with? I cannot show you their place in their society in relation to other elements in the frame. The only thing I can use is the other people. So the actors in that scene became props for me. They became the tools that I used to place them, vis-a-vis each other, to tell you what each of them means to each other. So even when the policeman decides to check the little girl to see if she really was raped, you sort of see that from the perspective of the little girl.
Yeah.
You see where she lies. She lies so low down, and he fills up the frame. It's almost like he's a wall that she cannot surmount.
Yeah.
She will always have to get past this misogyny, this patriarchy, to become her own woman. So I placed them very specifically to sort of play with, to sort of communicate that food chain of the society that they all inhabit.
Another talking about the same scene, all of these things, how much of that happens on set and how much of that is planned before you even start shooting?
So again, this changes from scene to scene.
Okay.
I do a lot of workshops. Yes, there are a lot of readings. I also do one round of rehearsals on location because when I shoot, I don't have the luxury of resources, so I don't have the luxury of time. Ajji was shot in 18 days flat because we didn't have the kind of budgets to even shoot a 19th day. So when you don't have those kind of resources, time and money, then you plan as much as you can, but depending on the kind of scene I'm shooting, after planning, I allow my actors to respond to the energy on that day.
Okay.
But in the scene that you've mentioned, I actually shot, I have a record for the number of shots in a day with that scene. We shot 78 shots in that one night, in that one shift. So I had to pull off that entire scene in one night, in 12 hours. So I didn't have the liberty of too much of improvisation. Although when you plant everybody in that room and they start reacting to each other, certain things happen.
Yeah.
Certain authentic truths come out in performance that I don't then disallow. I'll give you a very specific example. Vibha, the mother, when she's standing there and the policeman has started to corner each of them, saying that you're illegal, you're illegal.
Yeah.
If you notice, she's taken the pallu of her sari and she's sort of knotting it. She's playing with it. There is a lot of her nervous tension that is coming out in her fidgeting with the pallu of the sari.
Yeah.
That was very, very impromptu. And I turned the camera to that. I just grabbed my DOP's hands while he was shooting and I pushed it to Vibha's hands. And that moment gave us an emotion that her face could not give us.
Okay.
So I'm saying it's a mix of all of these things. Because that little action was not preempted, was not rehearsed. It happened on the spot.
Diving more into your process with actors, in Bhonsle, there are, I guess, very minimal lines with Manoj sir. Very minimal lines. And so what's your process of working with the actor just before the shot? What happens before the shot and what happens before you go to the go on the shoot? Like in the workshops. Can you elaborate a bit on that?
Very difficult to sort of
pinpoint
it on it because it really depends on the actor. It depends on what I seek of the actor. Like with Manoj specifically, he's a mix of two things.
Okay.
He and I, we spent many years on Bhonsle because we were not finding producers. 4 years of discussions and rewrites.
Mm-hmm.
And with every rewrite, I kept taking lines away and trying to make it a silent performance.
Mm-hmm.
So at a workshop stage, we workshopped for 6-7 days, and we arrived at a lot of internal things that I wanted him to explore, that he would then manifest in his hands, in the
Okay.
way his face turns, in the way his eyes drop and he looks up. I wanted those emotions to manifest in his body.
Okay.
Like I kept telling my cinematographer, Jigmet Wangchuk, on that film, I used the word landscaping Bhonsle's body.
Yeah. Yeah.
We wanted to see Bhonsle's body as a landscape. So those emotions started manifesting in the body, but Manoj has to be allowed that freedom to go where he wants to go on the day of the shoot. So although we discussed this to death, we figured the little codes and the little nuances of what he may do with his body. But when we are shooting, and I also keep my camera fairly organic and free-flowing, I don't know how to do a track shot or a static block. I need handheld. I need to allow the actor to move, to get into the character, so that the camera then follows that same speed and energy that the actor has discovered.
Yeah.
And the two sort of do a dance thereafter.
Okay.
So I allowed Manoj that freedom then to find those little nuances, and the speed of his walk or the lack of speed, the slowness with which he walks was him. But we arrived at that. And then I wanted me and the cameraman and the camera to discover that as Manoj was discovering it. So it's a very difficult process to really break it down into pieces, but it's many stages of discovery. It is a discovery when you're reading with the actor, the script. Then it's a discovery when you're workshopping. Then it's a third stage of discovery when you're rehearsing on set. Then it's a fourth stage of discovery when you're actually shooting it. So I often don't do retakes because we've prepped enough, and I like that authenticity of the first or the second take. But if I find that, yes, we are getting something magical and we are not there yet, I push for a third or fourth take where something new gets discovered.
Yeah.
So it's many stages of discovery.
Okay. Another thing, sir, in your films is that you don't shy away from violence, or basically you don't shy away from reality. You don't turn your camera away. Now, a lot of filmmakers have this approach that instead of showing the violence, I can leave it to audience's imagination. What's your take on that? What's your philosophy of showing the things which are like usually not seen?
I will repeat, it depends on the film. I do different things in different films. If you see Ugly Bar, which is your favorite short film, the violence is not in frame.
Screen. Yeah.
Yeah, it's firmly off screen. Rukhsana, you only hear her screams. The last guy, Javed, you don't see him. You only see the camera of his phone going crazy.
Yeah.
There is not even one blood splatter in frame. In Ajji, it's just the opposite.
Yeah.
You see all the blood being splattered in frame. So I allow the prerogative of that film to decide these things for me. Because I have often seen a lot of filmmakers who have promise, but you see them repeating a certain code from film to film, and ultimately they reach a film where that code need not have been implemented in this film, but because they've done it in all the previous films, they end up doing it in this film as well. The one filmmaker who I can quote in this regard is Tarantino. Tarantino has a certain, sexy way that he sees violence.
Yeah.
And I have a very conflicted relationship with Tarantino's films. I really enjoy that vicarious pleasure you get from those slow motion gunshots and blood being splattered like in Kill Bill. So it works in a Reservoir Dogs. It works in a Kill Bill. It ceases to work in his later films. Because in his later films, it just starts looking like he's indulging the violence because that seems to have become his voice.
Okay.
So I decided early on as a filmmaker that I will allow the film I'm making at that point to decide my code. So if Ugly Bar needs violence to be off frame so that I make you feel a chill at not being able to see the violence, I'll keep it off frame. With Ajji, I needed to make you feel the horror of what people in that world go through. I had to keep the violence in frame. So I don't have an overriding sort of philosophy. My philosophies are political, which my political philosophies are unchangeable from film to film. If you see all my films, it's fairly clear where I stand vis-a-vis
Yeah.
the current government, where
Yeah.
I stand vis-a-vis human rights.
Uh-huh.
But my filmmaking philosophies or my philosophy of violence changes from film to film depending on what is that film
Okay.
wanting to say.
Uh-huh. So, what's your comment on style of a director and also the voice of a director? I guess the voice is what you are saying right now, that your political philosophies will never change and it's there. That's your voice. But what is your comment on, like, a lot of people say, what's your style as a director? Do you think that's a bad concept for a director? It limits the director?
Yes, it does. And style is not something that a director should be conscious of.
Huh.
Like if you ask me what's my style, I don't know.
Yeah.
Between Ajji and Bhonsle, they look like films made by two different filmmakers.
True.
So I'm almost schizophrenic when it comes to style because I try to break my style with every film. I mostly fail, but I'm still trying.
Now I was saying, actually you don't. Your narratives, like Rahim Murge Pe Mat Ro and Ilaichi and Bhonsle, you don't, sir. You've done, like, all the films look like made by different people. Sorry,
But
continue.
in Ajji and Bhonsle, I've been actually told a lot that I've been accused of repeating myself.
Okay.
And people are fairly right because Ajji and Bhonsle thematically were very close.
Huh.
They just happened to get made back to back, so they look similar in certain ways. But I'm saying style is not a bad thing to have, but I think the filmmaker should not be conscious of it.
Oh,
Let the
yeah.
viewers decide.
Huh.
The minute, like I said, Tarantino, the problem with Tarantino, his last 4 films for me are unwatchable because they feel like a filmmaker who's self-conscious of his style. And if he was not conscious of his style, he could have been a great in my eyes. But he fell from being a great because he's now too self-conscious.
Yeah.
Like if you see the filmography of a Ken Loach, or you see the filmography of a Martin Scorsese, you can tell a certain voice, yes, but you can't really pinpoint a style.
Yeah.
It changes from like Ken Loach's films in the 70s and Ken Loach's films in the 90s almost feel, if you disregard the politics, they feel like a different filmmaker was making them. He's not self-conscious.
Yeah.
The only thing he's held on to is his political philosophy.
Okay.
So I think a filmmaker should be unconscious of that. If you want to do different things, please, you are meant to do different things as an artist. Let the audience sort of find your style and hold on to it.
We met 2 years ago and you said that your seniors have exploited you a lot. And if I come to assist you, I will exploit you a lot in the whole thing. So can you, like, at that time we didn't get a chance to lead that conversation ahead. So what are your thoughts on that? Why would you say that?
Yeah, I mean, I try and be as upfront as possible about how exploitative the independent cinema space is. And there's I'm not going to mince my words.
Yeah.
And we should call a spade, and that doesn't get done often. You know, in North America, there was this period in the early 90s, especially after the release of Sex, Lies and Videotape. That sort of started a phase of 5 or 6 years where a lot of independent, very, very small budget films were being made.
Okay.
And a lot of really good actors came out of that era. And when the actors sort of stopped doing those independent films, they started doing studio films, they started really blasting those independent filmmakers and just the ecosystem around those small independent films.
Yeah.
They said, you guys sort of romanticize the hardships and the lack of resources and the difficulties of making those films, but you'll never talk about the fact that nobody gets paid, nobody gets decent food. We are shooting 16 hours a day. You're flouting each and every rule that each and every union and guild in America has ever come up with. Nobody talks about that.
Yeah.
So when you are working in that kind of an unhealthy ecosystem where it's not conducive to long-term making of cinema, you can only do this for 1 film, 2 films, max 3 films. Then you burn out.
Yeah.
Because you're not being able to feed yourself as a filmmaker.
Yeah.
When you can't sustain that ecosystem, is it an ecosystem worth having? Are we deluding ourselves by, only focusing on how romantic that notion of the martyr filmmaker is? Because I suffered on all my short films and including my features. Both of my features were made in record time, in record budgets. People didn't get paid what they should have gotten paid.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that should be done, because if you do that, a film like Ajji or a film like Ugly Bar will never get made.
Hmm.
So obviously some corners have to be cut for those films to be made.
Hmm.
Even now, I made 2 short films earlier this year that I produced myself with every last rupee I had ever saved. So I got together a bunch of people, young short filmmakers, very passionate little mafia, I call it, my little mafia, because there's no other way to make a short film or a feature film in an independent manner unless you approach it like a war.
Yeah.
So I prepared my team saying, you're going to war, you're all soldiers, be ready to die, because I know I am. Because even on Ajji, when I was diagnosed with the startings of cancer, I pretty much prepared my associate director and my first AD with the short breakdown with such detail. I was prepared that if I die today, the shoot should not stop. So I go in treating it like a war because I know I don't have the resources to treat it like a job.
Yeah.
But sometimes I wonder, is that worth it? Because I might do this once, I might do it twice, I might do it 10 times. But can I sustain it for life? No.
Yeah.
So even the 2 short films I made this year, I don't know if I can keep doing this. Because I can see that disappointment in the people I work with beyond the point when you're not getting paid, not getting really good food or really good, a good pickup to a difficult location 4 hours away. It sort of tells. It tells on your performance. It tells on your own willingness to give 100%. So nobody calls out the independent space for these minuses. We only look at it for the romanticization of we are bleeding to make our art. Yeah, you'll bleed once, you'll bleed twice, and you'll run out of blood. Where will you bring more blood from, man?
Yeah.
So this needs to be spoken about as well.
Okay. And another thing that, sir, a lot of your films are political, and a lot of issues happening around affect you in a very personal and in a very strong manner. So how do you function on a day-to-day basis when like so much is going on and like it's so negative outside? So how do you function on like day-to-day basis? How do you function?
It's really hard, man. I think every day is a bit of a battle. But I feel artists especially are blessed that we have a channel to root our anger and our restlessness through. I often think about my father, who was one of the inspirations behind Bhonsle, and a lot of the loneliness of Bhonsle was inspired by the loneliness of my father, who I left behind in Calcutta for 15 years when I came to Bombay. He passed away last year, but I often used to wonder that the kind of restlessness and angst and sorrow that I feel seeing the state of this country, he is feeling as well. But I put it in my art. Where does he put it? Because he was a sari seller. He had a sari shop all his life. So when you don't have a channel, you don't have a route to sort of redirect these emotions through, they fester inside you and they eventually might sort of consume you. So I feel blessed as an artist that every day I get a chance to root this into my art. Which brings me to, if you feel these things, I think it's a disservice to yourself to not put it in your art. Because I know a lot of artists who feel these things, but they would rather make really happy romantic comedies and turn away from these feelings that they are feeling inside. So they end up almost schizophrenic in how they deal with their emotions. They're feeling something inside that is destroying them, but they're constantly creating things that they're not feeling deep inside. So the work they're creating starts to feel inauthentic, and what they're feeling inside authentically starts to make them sick.
Okay. And is this one of the reasons why you make films, sir?
It is the only reason.
It's the only
reason.
Like
I said early in this conversation, if I didn't have my politics to speak about, I would not even make films. I would not be a filmmaker. So if I don't have something to say, and this is also an age-old argument, do you need to have something to say to be a filmmaker? And I would not prescribe that as a universal truth. There are a lot of filmmakers who are filmmakers purely because they want to explore the aesthetics that the medium allows. They don't care to have something to say. And those filmmakers have also created works of art. But me personally, if I didn't have something to say, I wouldn't be a filmmaker.
Okay. So on that note, thank you so much for having this conversation, sir. got to learn a lot, got to know a lot about you, and it was a fun conversation. I hope you also had fun. And
Yeah, it was a
again,
great conversation.
thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you so much for joining us for the season one of where we talk about films. We plan to come up with another season shortly. Now, if you have missed any episodes from season one, we have made a playlist which will be available in the description below. What else do they say? Like, share, subscribe to our channel. And it's fine if you don't, but please keep making films, keep watching good films, keep appreciating cinema. And also, please do subscribe. Thank you so much. Bye bye.